Hey, what's going on, y'all? Welcome to today's video. All right, I'm Matthew Canada, and today's episode is going to be a little bit different. Now, I know that there are many people out there that talk about, hey, you should love yourself. And it's like, what do you mean I should love myself? And there's something that I discovered that many people actually go throughout life doing that causes for them to not feel loved. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to be starting with this scripture, Mark chapter 12, starting at verse 30. Or actually, let's start at 29. And Jesus answered him, the first of all commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. And the second is like, namely this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these. Now, when I first read that scripture, I was like, okay, supposed to love your neighbor as you love yourself. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and your strength and your soul. Fair enough, easy to do. Learn how to do it. But something that I actually figured out is your neighbor is not just the person that lives next to you. When Jesus is saying love your neighbor as yourself, your neighbor is anyone that is close to you at that specific moment in time. So it could be your coworker, it could be a stranger that's out when you're at the store, it could be someone driving next to you. Your neighbor is the person that's closest to you at that moment in time. And once I realized that, I was just like, okay, man, so I need to learn how to love everyone that I'm basically coming in contact with. But the most important part of that is it says love your neighbor as yourself. Now, when I was in my English classes and I was learning about these different words and how to utilize them, when something says as, it's also speaking of, in a similar way. So for you to love your neighbor as yourself, what does exactly that mean? Well, it means that you have to love yourself. And what I've discovered is that I have went throughout life, and maybe you've even gone throughout life, wanting people's approval, wanting to show people that you love them, wanting to show people that you care about them, wanting to show people that, hey, look, I'm treating you this way, so I want you to treat me this way also. And when that happens, you really just end up looking crazy, because the way that you've been treating people, the way that you've been showing love to people, many times ends up not being in the same way that you receive it. So when it comes to you actually loving yourself, what does that look like? And you might be asking me that question, like, Matthew, what do you mean by loving yourself? Well, loving yourself, what I have found is treating yourself well, speaking well of yourself, saying no to certain things. And when that happens, now you are able to say no to other people, because why? You say no to yourself. You hold yourself accountable. You don't, let's say, eat certain things. Why? Because you are holding yourself accountable. So if you're talking with someone or they're doing some type of harm to their body, you can speak on that because you're loving them as you love yourself. But if you're sitting there, like, say, for instance, when I was younger, I used to walk around people. Let's say if I'm walking to school, or maybe I'm at church or something like that, and people like, smoking cigarettes, and they're like, hey, when you get older, don't smoke these cigarettes. And I'm like, okay, so you're telling me to do something that is obviously good enough for you, but it's not good enough for me. And what ends up happening that many people don't realize, say, for instance, when you have children, your children do 100% of what you do, and they do 0% of what you say. And that is the same way in real life. People will do 100% of what you do and do 0% of what you say. And why is it that they do that? And it's because people follow others based on what they do, on what they see. They don't understand that later on down the road, maybe this person ends up with cancer. They don't understand that maybe later on down the road, this person ends up with diabetes, or, maybe they end up having a stroke or a heart attack when it comes to different health issues. They don't understand that this person is not going to have a certain amount of money because they didn't save, they didn't invest. And these are things that you have to start thinking about. You have to love your neighbor as you love yourself. That means that you have to start respecting yourself. When you start to respect yourself, when you start to love yourself, when you start to put yourself first in making decisions, you are going to be ahead of a lot of other people, because when something happens, you're able to automatically act in a way that you would act for yourself. And even it goes back to the verse that says you reap what you sow. So many people think that that's only, well, if I put out good things, then I'm going to get good things. And if I put out bad things, then I'm not going to get bad things. No, if you put out good things, you're going to get good things when you end up having a harvest. If you put out bad things, you're going to end up getting bad things when you put out a harvest. And these are things that you have to start thinking about. When you start to get angry about certain things, everything doesn't need to have a response. Sometimes the best response is no response. And that is an answer. And, when it comes to your job, you could lose that tomorrow. When it comes to your income, the economy could crash. Your car, your house could be repossessed. Your relationship, the woman that you're with could leave. Or if you're a woman listening to this, the man that you're with could leave. Your reputation could be gone, your health. All of these things can be gone, but you have to build your foundation on the right things. And even Jesus talked about this. He talked about building your foundation on the rock and not on sand. And why is it so important to build your foundation on the rock? Because when the storms come, the house may leave, the house may go down. You may have to do renovations, something may break, but the foundation is there so you can always rebuild again. If you build your house on sand, you're going to have to find a whole nother place to go and rebuild, because the entire house is going to be gone. And why is it important for you to focus on loving yourself? The reason why it's important is because if you're a believer, Christ lives within you. I was watching this reel, and Terrence Howard was talking, and he said that one of the things that he was told by a guy is that everyone has a piece of God within them. And when you meet people, it's important for them to see God in you before you see the God in them. And I believe that that's so true, because if you actually believe that what God says, or who God is, who he says he is, which is God is love, God is patient, God has no respect of person, which means he treats everyone with the same respect. That means that you have to treat yourself with the same respect. When you go to work, your boss is no different than you. And that's really a great thing, a point to bring up, because one of the things that really changed me is when I stopped allowing for my job to be who I am. You get stuck going to school, you get stuck being there for 4 or 5, 6 years, or however long, depending on if you're a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. And that becomes your identity. It's like, oh, I'm such and such the doctor, or I'm such and such the engineer, or I'm such and such the lawyer, when that is just what you do. Who are you without the lawyer, without the title of lawyer, or without the title of being a doctor, or without the title of being an engineer? Who are you? And I believe that's how so many people get caught up in not being able to love themselves, and they get frustrated because you believe that you deserve a certain amount of respect because of the title that you hold, instead of knowing that you are owed a certain type of respect because of who you are. You are a human being. And because you are a human being, you deserve to be treated as a human being. Now, I know people are going to say, well, Matthew, is racism out here? There's people being prejudiced against men, against women, against your gender and all that different type stuff. I 100% agree with that. Yes, there are people out here that are doing things like that. However, that's not stopping you from being the best version of you possible. And you can sit there and be like, oh man, Matthew, but you just don't know. Trust me, man, I do know. There's been many a times where I've been judged and people have said certain things about me, and even honestly to my face. But you know what? When I started to actually study how Jesus carried himself, and even it talks about in John chapter 1, Jesus knew that he was God, and he didn't force anybody else to believe that he was God, but he just carried himself and he didn't really care what anybody else thinks. So I know who Matthew is. Whatever your name is, you need to discover who you are if you don't know already. And if you do know who you are and whose you are, now you can start carrying yourself in a way with love, in a way with dignity, and treating yourself with respect. Why? Because your neighbor deserves it. This is even when Jesus talks about turning the other cheek. Why is it that you're turning the other cheek? The reason why you're turning the other cheek is because, one, you love yourself enough not to hurt yourself. And number two, because you love yourself enough not to hurt yourself, you're not going to hurt your neighbor. And I know people are going to say, well, man, they hit me and this and that. And I'm not saying that you just sit there and get beat up on, but you can turn the other cheek and walk away. You can remove yourself from the situation. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that, sometimes a reaction happens and, if I'm caught up in a situation, it could be possible that I react. However, you have to love yourself enough to be able to be grounded. So even if you are faced with a situation like that, then you're going to be good. And really, truth be told, I personally don't believe that I would end up in a situation like that because of the fact that I just keep myself out of those environments. And why do I keep myself out of those environments? Because I love myself. I just don't put myself in certain predicaments. I don't put myself in certain situations because I love myself. And I know that you love yourself too. You just have to get deep down within yourself and say, look, yes, I have some things that I don't like, but you can work on those things. You can become better. You can be a better individual. And that's what life is all about. So my challenge for you is I want you to actually go out there and I want you to start writing down some things. What are some things that you like about yourself and what are some things that you dislike? Everybody has them and it's okay to have them, things that you dislike. But use that as an opportunity for you to go out there and actually learn how you can become a better individual. Sometimes everything doesn't need a response. Sometimes you just take mental notes of what's going on. Because in the end, you could spend all of this time, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years, 60 years building this life. And it can all be gone in a matter of 10 seconds. So I hope that this video this podcast episode was able to actually help you. And, if you are not already following, make sure you go ahead and hit that follow button so you can stay up to date on new episodes on the podcast. New episodes of the podcast drop every Monday and every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Also, if you all have any topics that you would like to talk about, make sure that if you're watching this on YouTube, you can comment them down below. And I'm looking forward to seeing you and speaking with you in the next podcast. Have a good one.